Okay, today's lesson is in Module 1, Lesson 7, and we are going to learn how to round a given decimal to any place using place value understanding and vertical number lines. So today we are rounding. So let's start with this first fluency, which is a review of yesterday's lesson. We learned how to compare decimals. Remember, I taught you in that lesson to always line up your decimals to get your place values together. So I'm going to use my first number at the top, and I'm simply going to copy this number under it. So we got 12 and 75 hundredths. Starting with the greatest place value, remember if they are the same, it does not help us. So we see that the ones in the tens place does not help us. The 2 in the ones place does not help us. The tenths place help us because they have two different numbers. So we know that 5 tenths is less than 7 tenths. So there's our comparison. Okay. The next one, notice they did not give us the same form. They gave us standard form, then they switched it to fraction form. So all I have to do is write either both in standard or both in fraction. So for this one, let's write both in fraction. Tenths, hundredths, so 100 is my denominator, 67 is my number that's on top. And I'm simply going to copy my second fraction. Notice they are the exact same. So that gives us equal to. Okay, let's try another one. Notice this is also in different forms. They gave us standard and they gave us word. So that means I need to change one of them to make them have the same form. So either I can do standard, standard, or I can do word, word. For this one, I think I'm going to do standard, standard. So 47 tenths. First word I notice is tenths, which means I need one decimal place. The 7 sits in that place, which means the 4 has to move. There's my standard form. Now I'm ready to line them up. So the 4 is in the ones place. My decimals are in the same place. My 7 is right under it. Remember, if I need it to be even, I can simply add a placeholder. Starting with the ones place, they're the same, so it doesn't help us. The tenths place are different. We got a 0 tenths and a 7 tenths. And we know that 0 tenths are less than 7 tenths. So there's our comparison. Okay. Our next fluency is to rename the units. Notice they gave us standard form, and we're simply renaming it and saying it in unit form. Unit form is going to be the number in the unit. So think about it. If the number is missing, but they gave you the unit, you should quickly know what number should go in that blank. So if I have 1 and 5 tenths, I know that equals 15 tenths. 2 and 5 tenths equals 25 tenths. 17 and 5 tenths equals 175 tenths. Remember when I taught you in the previous lesson to change from standard to unit? We ignored that decimal. We simply wrote the number and gave the last unit. Let's try one more. 27 and 5 tenths would give us 275 tenths. Okay, let's get into this lesson. In today's lesson, we are rounding. Whenever we round, that means we're getting close. We're getting the estimate. For example, if I am 5'11", instead of saying I'm 5'11", I might say I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not exactly 6 feet, but I'm close to 6 feet. So rounding is simply getting close to a number that's more compatible or easier to work with. So we're going to start by decomposing. Remember, decompose means to break down. So we're going to break down into place values, and then we're going to choose which decomposed set of numbers we need to round to each of these place values. So let's start with 155. We need to decompose it. Well, I know one way to decompose it is 100, 5 tens, 5 ones. Notice all I did was put the digit with its place value. The 1 is in the hundreds place, the 5 is in the tens place, the 5 is in the ones place. So that's one way to decompose. I also can decompose by skipping the hundreds. I'm going to put the 1 and the 5 together in the tens place. Okay? Which leaves me 5 in the ones place. So now I have 15 tens, 5 ones. And then the third way I can decompose, I can put all of my digits in the ones, 155 ones. If you think about money, it's just different ways to make the same amount. If I have $155, I could have one $100 bill, 5 $10 bills, 5 $1 bills. Or I could have 15 $10 bills, 5 $1 bills. Or I could have 155 $1 bills. Either way, I still have $155. Okay? Now that we've decomposed, we're ready to start rounding. First place we're rounding to is the tens place. So looking at my decomposed numbers, I need to figure out which set would be best for me to use to round to the tens place. Hopefully you realize that I want to use the set that starts at the tens place. So on my number line, I'm going to write what I've decomposed, which is 15 tens, 5 ones. Okay? Now, remember that's our exact. We're trying to round. So when we round, we're either going to go down to 15 tens or we're going to go up to 16 tens. Oops. So either my answer is going to be 15 tens or 16 tens. Okay? Now, what helps me figure out if I'm going to drop to this 15 tens or if I'm going to take it up to the 16 tens is the 5 ones. Anytime you see that extra unit, you need to think about the midpoint. Midpoint is normally involves a 5. The midpoint between 0 and 10 is 5. The midpoint between 0 and 1 is 5 tenths. The midpoint between 0 and 1,000 is 5 hundredths. So notice 5 keeps showing up. So anytime this number is 5 or greater, you're going to round it up. Anytime this number is less than the midpoint of 5, which means 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, you're going to take it down. Okay, so 5 or greater, take it up. Less than 5, take it down. Well, in this case, it's 5, which means I'm going to take it up. So if I round 155 to the tens place, it's going to round to 16 tens, which in standard form would be 16 and 10 has 1 0. So 155 rounded to the tens place will be 160. Okay. Then it asks us to round to the nearest 100. So for this one, if I'm rounding to the nearest 100, the decomposed sentence I need to use is the one that starts with the 100. So in the middle, I'm going to write my 100, and then I need that very next unit, which is 5 tens. That's all I need. Okay? Remember, we're either going to round down to simply 100, or we're going to round up to 200. Okay? Something you need to keep in mind. When I say round down, that does not mean take this number down. This number either stays the same or it goes up. A good way to help you remember that is think about when you're in school. If you're in the 4th grade, if you don't pass the 4th grade, can you be moved back down to 3rd? No. You either stay in 4th or you move up to 5th. Same thing here. It either stays a 1 or it moves up to a 2. Don't ever bring this number down to a 0. Okay? So, once again, we're looking at that midpoint. Notice it's a 5. 5 tens is a midpoint. So remember, 5 or more, we're going to raise it up. So 155 rounded to the nearest 100 gives me 200. And if I write 200 in standard form, I'm going to copy my 2. 100 has 2 zeros. So 155 rounds to 200. That's how simple it is. Decompose. Whatever place value you're rounding to, that's where we want to start. When we rounded to the tens place, we started with the tens. When we rounded to the hundreds place, we started in the hundreds. If I round to the ones place, I would have started right here with the ones place. Let's try another one. Okay, so we are going to decompose 1 and 57 hundredths. Notice now we have a decimal, but my steps do not change. So I'm going to put my digits in their place values. The 1 is in the ones, the 5 is in the tenths, the 7 is in the hundredths. I can decompose it another way. I can start at the tenths, which means I need 15 tenths, 7 hundredths. I can decompose it one more time and just start with all hundreds, which would be 157 hundredths. So those are my 3 ways to decompose. First, they asked me to round to the nearest whole number. But anytime we're looking for the nearest whole number, please remember that's always the ones place. Nearest, they're looking for what whole number is closest to the decimal. Well, the decimal is always here, and what whole number is always right in front of it? The ones place. So if you ever see nearest whole, they always want the ones place. So because I'm rounding to the ones place, that means I need to use the decomposed number that starts with the ones place. So on my number line, I'm going to write right in the middle, 1, 1. And remember, we just need that next unit, 5 tenths. Okay, so we're using the 1, 1, 5 tenths. Now remember, when we round, it's either going to stay a 1 or it's going to go up to a 2. Okay, remember, you cannot be dropped down a grade. You either repeat that grade or you go up to the next grade. You either repeat that grade or you go up to the next grade. Okay, so let's recap this one in case any of it was missed. We started by rounding to the nearest whole number, which I told you is always the ones, because the ones place is the nearest whole number to the decimal. Because I needed the ones, we started with the decomposed sentence that started with the ones. We then moved on and we rounded to the nearest tenth. Because I'm rounding to the tenth place, we use the decomposed sentence that started with the tenths. So we put our 15 tenths in the middle with the 7 hundredths, taking that next unit. We knew that either it was going to round to 15 tenths or it was going to go up to 16 tenths. That 7 hundredths is greater than the midpoint, which would be 5 hundredths, so we had to round up. So we rounded to 16 tenths. We then changed that unit form to standard form. Tenths is 1 decimal place. That 6 got to sit in it, and that 1 had to shift. So we know when we round 1 and 57 hundredths to the nearest tenth, we get 1 and 6 tenths. Okay. Moving on to our next one. We're going to start by decomposing 4 and 381 thousandths to the nearest tens, ones, tenths, and hundredths. So we're going to round this one 4 different ways. So I'm going to start my decompose with the tens. Notice we don't have a tens. So I'm just going to put a 0 because we don't have anything in the tens place. The number starts in the ones. So we got 4 ones, 3 tenths, 8 hundredths, 1,000. Then I can decompose. Notice I don't necessarily have to start with the ones again because 0 doesn't mean anything. So this is also my decompose starting with the ones. So I'm just going to go straight to the tenths. So we got 43 tenths, 8 hundredths, 1,000. Now I'm going to start with the hundredths. 438 hundredths, 1,000. And then I can decompose with all thousandths. It's 4,381. So those are my 4 ways to decompose. Starting with the tens, which we didn't have any. Then we started with the ones. Then we started with the tenths. Then we started with the hundreds. Then we started with the thousands. Now, we're rounding to the 10. So I'm sure you already know. We're going to use the sentence that starts with the tens. Well, notice I have 0 tens. So that's what I'm going to write on my number line. 0 tens. Right beside it is 4 ones. Okay, so when we round this, it's either gonna round down to 0 tens or it's gonna round up to 1 10. Okay, so those are my options. Either 0 tens or 1 10. Okay, so I'm looking at my unit to the side. Remember, my midpoint is gonna be 5. My midpoint for this problem will be 5 ones. 4 ones is less than 5 ones, which means I'm gonna round down. So my answer when I round to the tens place is 0 tens. So it rounds to 0 tens. Okay. Next, it asks us to round to the nearest 1. So of course, because we're rounding to the ones place, I'm going to start my decomposed sentence with the ones place. So right in the middle, I need to write my 4 ones. And I need that very next unit, 3 tenths. So all I've copied is my 4 ones, 3 tenths. Now for my options. I'm either going to round down to 4 ones, or I'm going to round up to 5 ones. Remember, as I said, if you repeat a grade, if you don't pass, you don't go back down to 3rd grade. You either stay in 4th grade or you pass to 5th grade. We do not go down to 3rd. Okay? So, looking to see, is 3 tenths going to be greater than my midpoint of 5 or less than? 3 is less than 5, which means I'm going to round down to my 4 ones. So when I round 4 and 381 thousandths to the nearest ones, I get 4. Let me write that out. It rounds to 4 because I rounded to the ones place. Okay. Now they want us to round to the nearest 10. Well, as we've talked about, if I'm rounding to the nearest 10th, I'm going to start with the decomposed sentence that starts with the tenths. So in the middle, I need 43 tenths. And I need that extra unit, which is 8 hundredths. I'm going to abbreviate. And we know that's either going to round down to 43 tenths, or it's going to round up to 44 tenths. Those are my options. It either stays 43 tenths or it goes up to 44 tenths. Looking at my extra unit, I know that 8 hundredths is greater than my midpoint of 5 hundredths, so it's going to round up to 44 tenths. 8 is greater than 5, so I round up. So I know that 4 and 381 thousandths rounds to 4 and 4 tenths. Okay. Then they asked us to round to the hundredths place. Let's do blue. So because I'm rounding to the hundredths place, of course, I'm going to use my decomposed sentence that starts with hundredths. So in the middle, I need 438 hundredths. I'm going to abbreviate again. And I need my 1,000th, which I'm also going to abbreviate. It's either going to round down 438 hundredths, or it's going to round up to 439 hundredths. Okay. Looking at my extra unit of 1,000, you need to think to yourself, is 1,000 greater, equal or greater to my midpoint of 5 thousandths, or is it less than? Well, we know that 1 is less than 5. So that means we're going to round down to 438 hundredths. So that tells us that when we round 4 and 381 thousandths, when we round it to the hundredths place, we're going to get 4 and 38 hundredths. Okay. Let's Go through, we have one more where we are rounding to the tens, ones, tenths, and hundreds. So let's start with our decomposed part. Okay, so I got 9. Notice I have no tens, so I'm gonna start with my 0 tens, 9 ones, 9 tenths, 7 hundredths, 5 thousandths. Notice if I ignore the 0, basically this starts my ones, so I can go straight to my tenths right here. So I need 99 tenths, 7 hundredths, 5 thousandths. Starting in my hundredths, I need 997 hundredths, 5 thousandths. And then if I do all thousandths, I need 9,975 thousandths. There's my decomposed sentences. Starting with the tens place. Because I'm rounding to the tens place, that means I want to use the decomposed that starts with 10. Notice there are no tens. So in the middle, I'm going to write 0 tens. I'll put it on this side. 0 tens. And I need that extra unit of 9 ones. We're either going to round down to 0 tens, or we're going to round up to 1 10. Okay? Looking at that extra unit, remember our midpoint is 5. We know that 9 is greater than 5, which is going to make us round up. So when we round to the tens place, we're going to get 10. Okay? This should start to make more sense. We've done about 3 problems now. Okay? The next one asks us to round to the ones place, which of course means we're going to start with the ones. So in the middle, I need the 9 ones. And of course, I need that extra unit, which is 9 tenths. So we've used our 9 ones, 9 tenths. Now for our options. It's either going to stay 9 ones, or it's going to go up to 10 ones. Okay? So looking at our extra, remember we're always comparing it to the 5, the midpoint of 5. 9 tenths is greater than 5 tenths, which means we're going to round up. So rounding to the ones place, it's going to round to 10 as well. Now moving to the tenths place. Of course, I'm going to start right here because I'm rounding to the tenths place. So in that middle, I need 99 tenths. And I need that extra 7 hundredths. Okay, now for my options. It's either going to stay 99 tenths, or it's going to go up to 100 tenths. Okay, looking at my extra. Remember, we're comparing it to the 5 midpoint, 5 hundredths. I know that 7 hundredths is greater than 5 hundredths, which means I'm going to round up to 100 tenths, which means that it also rounds to 10. So notice, when we rounded to the tens place, we got 10. When we rounded to the ones place, we got 10. When we rounded to the tenths place, we got 10. Each one of them produced the answer of 10. Now we're going to round to the hundredths place. When we round to the hundredths place, of course, we start with the decomposed sentence that started in the hundredths place. So in the middle, I want 997 hundredths. And we need that extra 5 thousandths. We either round down 997 hundredths, or we round up to 998 hundredths. Okay, so looking at that extra, remember we are comparing that 5 thousandths to the midpoint of 5 thousandths. Well, 5 is the same as 5, so we're going to round up, which is going to take us to 998 hundredths. I'm going to write that in standard form. Hundredths tells me I need 2 decimal places. 1, 2. That 8 gets to sit in the last one, which means everything else has to shift. So when we round to the hundreds place, we're going to get 9 and 98 hundredths. Okay? So we're going to leave number 4 for in class. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this lesson up. Remember that in today's lesson, we learned how to round a given decimal to any place using place value understanding and the vertical number line. Remember our steps, we decomposed. Whatever place value we needed to round to, that's the decomposed sentence we started with. All right, until next time.